I just thought of this new game, okay? Let's say I'm talking to Billie Eilish. It's like Billie Eilish and I having a conversation. But we decide that the rules of the game is that we have to talk to each other in rhymes. Every sentence that we say, well, I was thinking, is it possible to actually form sentences that actually were in which every word in the sentence rhymes, but as many words as possible rhyme in the sentence? It's not like a haiku or something like that. Or some I don't know what it would be called, but it would be like, let's say it's like, okay, let's say I'm talking to Billie Eilish and I say like, I've got a date. I don't want to be late. The date's at 8. I'm going to pick her up in my crate. That is my fate. Do you relate? And then so Billie Eilish responds by saying, why don't you pick her up at 7? That would be more like heaven. Don't be like Kevin. What else rhymes with 7? Kevin ended up at the 7-Eleven. He now works at the 7-Eleven because he was late for his date. So that's his fate. And then I say, but I want to pick her up at 8 because I think my fate is to pick her up at 8 because my date was set at 8. And I think she would hate if I was late for my date at 8. My date with what girl's name rhymes with 8? Okay, no, I think you should pick her up at 7. That would be heaven. Don't be like Kevin. He now works at the 7-Eleven because he was late for his date at 7. So don't pick her up at 8. Pick her up at 7. No, I'm going to pick her up at 8. That was the original time for our date. I think she would hate somebody that she called her mate to be late for her date at 8. Because we wanted to recreate in this state. We wanted to recreate in the state of, in a state of, okay, wait a minute. Okay, I think the rhyme scheme is actually kind of working pretty good. So it's got to have some kind of rhythm to it. You said you wanted to pick her up at 8 in your crate. What's a crate? Your car or a crate? Well, I call my car a crate, so then therefore it rhymes with date and it rhymes with 8, and it rhymes with date, and I want to pick her up at 8 in my crate. I don't want to be late because I've got a date with. I've got a date with her at 8, and I don't want to be late. I'm not going to pick her up. If I pick her up at 7, I'll end up like Kevin. He now works at the 7-Eleven. Oh, wait a minute. But she said, wait a minute, I almost forgot my own thing. Didn't I have her say that, like, if you pick her up at 7, that you should pick her up at 7. Otherwise, you'll work at the 7-Eleven. So you don't want to end up like Kevin? Because that was his fate. He picked her up at 8. He was late for his date at 7. He picked her up at 8. Now he works at the 7-Eleven. Don't be like Kevin. I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out. Anyways. Okay, wait, another rhyme scheme. Okay, let's try another number. Okay, 8, 7, 5. Okay, what if I pick her up at 5? That's the time at which I feel most alive. That's the time at which I thrive. If I pick her up at 5, maybe she won't dive into a pool of jive with her knives, just like Clive And when I arrive at 5, I'm not going to act jive, because that way I won't thrive for my date at 5. And that way, if we dive into a pool of jive, we can then drive back into let's start with another number, 4. Okay, I want to pick her up at 4, because then if I pick her up at 4, maybe I'll score. I know she's no whore, because I saw through the door, and I didn't see her score. Okay, I know she's not a whore, because when I looked through the door, I didn't see her score. I saw she's just a bore. So I want to take a tour, and I want to ask for more. And I don't want to be a bore. I want to know the score. You know? Okay, what about 2? Maybe I'll pick her up at 2. And I'll ask her, what is new? And I'll ask her, what do you do? And she'll say, we're through. And I'll say, why? And then she'll say, you were supposed to be here at 8. That was our date. You're late. But the woman who I asked advice for said to pick you up at 7, because she knew a guy named Kevin that picked up her date Sheila at 8, and she said it was better to pick him up at 7. She says, so don't envelope like Kevin. He works at 7-Eleven. That was his fate, because he was late for their date at 8. So don't pick her up at 7. Pick her up at 8. Well, he was too early for the date at 8. He picked her up as now I'm confusing myself. Wait a minute. Okay. Pick her up at 1, but don't bring a gun. Don't make her run. Just have some fun. I'll pick her up at 6. I know all the tricks. I know how to get my kicks. I'll take her to the flicks. We'll watch the clock that ticks. Maybe we'll meet Stevie Nicks. She'll give us some ticks to our next concert. Okay, let's start with another number. Wait a minute. Okay. What now? I think I'm going to do Grey's Anatomy. Let me get my Grey's Anatomy book out. Okay. All right. Grey's Anatomy. Let's do the brain, because the brain is my favorite part of the body. Okay, I think it's the sexiest organ in the body, the brain. Okay, because when I see a sexy woman, I love a nice body. I love a nice ass. I love nice tits and everything, nice legs. But then what I'm thinking about most is the brain. I'm thinking, if I see a brain, because I could actually see through skulls. I could see into I've got this kind of like X-ray vision where a lot of guys, if they had X-ray vision, they would want to see right through the clothes and right so they could see her naked body, which I also love to see too. But I also love to see with my X-ray vision. I like to see through her skull so I can see her brain, so I can kind of see what's going on in her brain, see what the neuronal connections are there, the patterns that are happening in the brain, all the synapses and everything, what's firing in the brain, and what's kind of like what's making her tick, what types of thoughts she has, what kind of dreams and precognitions she might have, what kind of like hopes and desires, her yearnings, her all kinds of things are going on up there. So I think it's like as interesting as it is to see her bare titties. I like to see into the brain so I can see all the neuronal pathways that are happening in there, all the because I could from the neuronal pathways I could actually piece together a pretty good narrative of what kind of like thought processes she has, and what kind of like what kind of like different like dreams and desires and hopes and goals and all types of like yearnings and all kinds of stuff is going on up there. So that's why I think the brain is the sexiest organ of the body. So let me go to the brain. Okay, so the brain it is. Okay. The dura mater. The dura mater is a thick and dense, inelastic fibrous membrane which lies in the interior of the skull. Its outer surface is rough and fibrillated and adheres close to the inner surface of the bones, forming their internal periosteum. This adhesion being most marked opposite the suture at the base of the skull. Its inner surface is smooth and lined by a layer of endothelium. Okay. It sends force processes inward and into the cavity of the skull for the support and the protection of the different parts of the brain. It is prolonged to the outer surface of the skull through various foramina, which exist at the base, and thus becomes continuous with the perinarium. Its fibrous layer forms sheaths for the nerves which pass through these apertures. At the base of the skull is a fibrous prolongation into the forum of the coccyum. It sends a series of tubular prolongations around the filaments of the olfactory nerves as they pass through the cribriform plate, and also around the nasal nerve as it passes through the nasal slit. A prolongation is also continued. let's go through it. I'm just going to I like this section of the brain that this part of Gray's Anatomy, which really interests me more, starts on this page. Wait a minute. Okay, so let's see. Okay. The average weight of the brain in the adult male is 49.5 ounces, or a little more than 3 pounds. Avoirdupois. That sounds French. That of the female, 44 ounces. The average difference between the two being from 5 to 6 ounces. The prevailing weight of the brain in the male ranges between 46 ounces and 53 ounces, and the female between 41 ounces and 47 ounces. In the male, the maximum weight of 278 cases was 65 ounces, and the minimum weight was 34 ounces. The maximum weight of the adult female brain out of 191 cases was 56 ounces, and the minimum weight was 31 ounces. According to Luschka, the average weight of a man's brain is 1,424 grams, about 45 ounces, of a woman's 1,272 grams, about 41 ounces. And according to Krauss, 1,570 grams, 1,570 grams, about 48.5 ounces for the male, and 1,350, about 43 ounces for the female. It appears that the weight of the brain increases rapidly up to the 7th year, more slowly to between 16 and 20, and still more slowly to between 30 and 40 when it reaches its maximum. Beyond this period, as age advances and the mental faculties decline, the brain diminishes slowly in weight, about an ounce for each subsequent decennial period. These results apply to both sexes. The size of the brain was formerly said to bear a general relation to the intellectual capacity of the individual. Cuvier's brain weighed rather more than 64 ounces. That of late Dr. Abercrombie, 63 ounces, and that of Dupuytren, 62.5 ounces. On the other hand, the brain of an idiot seldom weighs more than 23 ounces, but these facts are by no means conclusive. And it is well known that these weights have been equaled by the brains of persons who never displayed any remarkable intellect. Dr. Haldeman of Cincinnati has recorded the case of a mulatto, age 45, whose brain weighed 68 and 3/8 ounces. Wait a minute. Dr. Ensdor, district medical officer at Port Elizabeth, reports that the brain of Carey, the Irish informer, weighed 61 ounces. M. Nikorov has published an article on the weight of the brains in Novosati. According to him, the weight of the brain has no influence whatever in the mental faculties. So it's not directly related, the weight of the brain. But I don't know. So it doesn't make any difference how much your brain weighs. It's the power of the brain. The elasticity of the brain, the strength of the neuronal connections, the neuronal pathways that are formed in the brain, the mental activity. So it's kind of like, and you must bear in mind also that the size of the brain is relative to the size of the body too. So you see, when you see some big idiot. Anyways, okay, so it ought to be remembered that the significance of the weight of the brain should depend upon the proportion it bears to the dimensions of the whole body and to the age of the individual. It is equally important to know that what was the cause of the death. For illness or old age exhausts the brain. To define the real degree of development of the brain is therefore necessary to have a knowledge of the condition of the whole body, and as this is usually lacking, the mere record of weight possesses little significance. The human brain is heavier than that of all the lower animals, excepting the elephant and the whale. The brain of the former weighs from 8 to 10 pounds, and that of a whale, in a specimen 75 feet long, weighed rather more than 5 pounds. Cerebral localization and topography. Physiological and pathological research have now gone far to prove that the surface of the brain may be mapped out in a series of definite areas, each one of which is intimately connected to some well-defined function. And this is especially true with regard to the convolutions on either side of the fissure of Rolando, which are believed to be, by most physiologists to the present day, to be concerned in motion. Those grouped around the fissure being associated with the movements of the extremities of the opposite side of the body, and those around the lower end of the fissure being related to the movements of the mouth and the tongue. This is not the place, nor can space be given to describe these localities. But the two accompanying cuts from Fourier have been introduced and will serve to. Let's go to some other book. Okay. Let's see what else. Oh, yes. Here we go. The Tibetan Book of the Dead. I got the Tibetan Book of the Dead here. Here we go. As part of my improvised comedy. Said to have its origins in the treasure texts that were supposedly hidden away by Padmasambhava, the Lotus Guru, in Tibet in the 8th century. The Tibetan Book of the Dead. This was written in the 8th century. Wow. Was traditionally read aloud to the dying or recently deceased as a guide to the afterlife. So if anybody in the listening audience in my YouTube live stream is listening to this, if you have any recently deceased friends or family members, this was like the book that the Tibetans in Tibet that they used to read aloud to the dying or deceased. Interesting. It explains how to recognize the true nature of the mind so that after death, it'll be possible to attain enlightenment and liberation from the suffering associated with the endless cycle of death and rebirth. It's a very therapeutic book. Okay, for many, reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead has been a revelatory experience on the path to finding a sense of spirituality and self-knowledge. Okay. Introduction. First published in 1927, the Tibetan Book of the Dead has sold over 500,000 copies, and its translation in many other European languages led to it becoming the most widely read Tibetan text in the West. The manuscript for this great work was discovered in 1919 by W.Y. Evans Wentz, immediately after the First World War, at a time when there was a resurgence of interest in spiritualism and the fate of the recently deceased. 8 years later, he published it. I'm just going to go right to the book. I'm done with the introduction. Okay, let's see. Book 1. See if I'm going to be able to pronounce this correctly. The the Chikai Pardo and the Kanyad Bardo. Herein lieth the setting face to face to the reality in the intermediate state. The great deliverance by hearing while on the after death plane from the profound doctrine of the emancipating of the consciousness by meditation upon the peaceful and wrathful deities. The Dharmakaya of thine own mind thou shalt see, and seeing that, thou shalt have seen the all, the vision infinite, the round of death, and birth, and the state of freedom. Milarepa. Death's messengers, all they who thoughtless are nor heed, what time death's messengers appear, must long the pangs of suffering feel, and some base body habiting. But all those good and holy men, what time they see death's messengers, behave not thoughtless, but give heed to what the noble doctrine says, and attachment frightened see of birth and death the fertile source, and from attachment free themselves, thus birth and death extinguishing, secure and happy ones they are they. Released from all this fleeting show, exempted from all sin and fear, all misery have they overcome. The transference of the consciousness principle by the guide, the highest intellects ought most certainly to be liberated, but should they not be liberated, then while in the intermediate state of the moments of death, they should practice the transference, which giveth automatic liberation by one's merely remembering it. Devotees of ordinary wit ought most certainly to be freed thereby, but should they not be freed, then while in the intermediate state during the experiencing of reality, they should persevere in the listening to the great doctrine of liberation by hearing. Accordingly, the devotee should at first examine the symptoms of death as they gradually appear in his dying body, following self-liberation by observing the characteristics of the symptoms of death. Then, when all the symptoms of death are complete, he should apply the transference, which conferreth liberation by merely remembering the process. Then the path of good, which is invoking the aid of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Bodhisattvas, should be recited 7 times or thrice. After that, the path of good wishes given protection from fear and bardo, and the path of good wishes for safe delivery from the dangerous pitfalls of the bardo, together with the root words of the bardo, are to be read distinctly and with a proper intonation. Then this great thodal is to be read either 7 times or thrice, according to the occasion. First cometh the setting face to face of the symptoms of the death, as they occur during the moments of the death. Second, the application of the great vivid reminder, the setting face to face of the reality while the intermediate state. And third, the methods of closing the doors of the womb while in the intermediate state when seeking rebirth. Part 1, the Bardo of the moments of death. Instructions of the symptoms of the first stage of the Chico Bardo. The primary clear light seen at the moment of death. Okay. The first, the setting face to face with the clear light during the intermediate state of the moment of death is here. Some there may be who have listened much to religious instructions. Not so organized. The manner of application is the best guru from one of the disease receiving guiding instructions may be had. But if the guru cannot be attained, then a brother of the faith or as a leader that's unattainable, then as a learner of the man the same thing. These are unstable. Then a person who can read correctly and distinctly ought to read them many times over. Okay. Oh, nobly born, so on and so on. Listen. Now thou art experiencing the radiance of the clear light of pure reality. Recognize it. Okay, I'm gonna